Hello, this is Nick from Breaker Press Games, and this is the Breaker Press update for November 12th, 2022. Alright, so what is going on with Breaker Press Games? Life is still a little tumultuous, but things are much more under control. And I harped quite a bit over the last couple of months about having time to work on stuff and needing to have the brain space to be able to work on stuff. And I said that I was going to take a step back away from my day job and work less hours, and that is actually working out to everybody's benefit. It is going really well. The One of the first things that I did once I had more time to actually work on things was actually to start doing some planning, figuring out what needs to be done, contacting artists, and looking at all of the documents, where they're at, and what needs to be done in order to get them moving forward. One of the other things that I needed to do, with less money coming in from my day job, was to solidify the other pillars of Breaker Press Games. And so one of the things that's been really important to me, I know it's not as important to all of you, but I put a lot of time into figuring out what to do with Patreon. Because having, Kickstarter is a roller coaster. It's like you have a bunch of money, and then you have no money, and then you have a bunch of money, and then you have no money. Whereas things like Patreon and Drive-Thru RPG are things where money comes in every single month. And so I really wanted to bolster those things, and I wanted to come up with a plan for Patreon that made sense with how my brain works and how my schedule works. And so I know I talked about it a bit before, but Cacophonous Bandits was something that was done as an experiment for a bunch of different things. And one of the things that I wanted to do, and the reason why I mailed these out to so many of you in October, was that I wanted to demonstrate to myself that I could start, finish, and ship one of these things in a timely fashion. And it just so happens that in my brain, it was a success. So I actually took, over the last couple of weeks, I took the Canine character class out of Rabid Dogs. I put it in its own separate zine with a bunch of bonus content, and also wrote things out longhand. So if something said, this is identical to the warrior ability of the same name, or identical to the thief ability of the same name, I actually put all of that content in long form, what it actually says, and put those things into the Canine zine. And the reason being is, one, that's going to be the October reward for Patreon. November. We're in November. That's going to be the November reward for Patreon. But I also wanted to make this as a mini zine so that when I'm running an adventure at a convention, I ran into this at GameholeCon, was that I was handing people copies of Rabid Dogs so that they could find out what their different classes did. And if I just had an 8-page zine that was just the Canine, or an 8-page zine that was just the Icon Bearer or the Outlier, I would be able to hand that to them, and they would be able to use that. And maybe if they wanted to take it home, they could take it home. So, that being said, I put the time in, and the Canine was put into its own zine. It is already done. It's gone through editing, just waiting for approval from Joseph Goodman. And that is going to ship to our November Patreon backers. And then another one of those zines for the Bruiser character class. And the Bruiser character class is an unarmed fighter that it has its own, because when you fight bare-fisted, the crit tables don't make sense. So I created a Bruiser crit table. There is a Bruiser-specific sample deed for stunning attacks. And I also added some Bruiser equipment, like gauntlets and things that made sense for a person that fights with their fists. So the Bruiser character class was something that I had actually put on Patreon at the beginning of when I started Patreon. I've fleshed it out. It's gone through some play testing, and I've turned it into what theoretically is its final form. It was going to go into Rabid Dogs Volume 2 at some point down the road, but, who knows how far off that is, so I pulled it out. Once again, wrote everything long form, and it's in its own 8-page zine, and that's going to ship out to Patreon backers in December. So what is Patreon, for those of you that, or what is my Patreon, for those that are not familiar? My Patreon now is a source where you can go and look at work in progress content, new stuff, ideas. I did different reports on what took place at Gamehall Con, and what were the basically blog posts of what went on in my brain while at Gamehall Con, as far as how my events went and how the convention went, etc., etc. But it is also a place where I make sure that every month there is something for people to download and have in their collection. And this month I put up a bunch of stuff because I put up the Canine class, the Bruiser class, a new adventure called Desperation of the Hungry, and so or encounter, I should say, and all of those things went on to Patreon in the last couple of weeks. And so those things will eventually go to print, and then as I said, you can download them now if you're a member of Patreon at any level, or you can, if you are a patron at $5 a month, you will get shipped shipped printed stuff, not free. You'll be shipped printed stuff for your $5 monthly contribution, and Cacophonous Bandits was one thing. The Canine zine is the next thing. Then the Bruiser zine will be in December, and then probably Desperation of the Hungry in January. And all of these things have already gone through editing and gone through layout. Everything's done. So it's stuff that is ready to go and will not stand in the way of any of the other stuff that needs to be done. So let's talk about the other stuff that needs to be done. Protectorate of Jenulane. Protectorate of Jenulane, I went through the document and I looked over what the art needs were and where I was in terms of editing and layout and what have you, and it needs a lot of art. Progress has been made, but more progress needs to be made. And so I reached out to Carlos Castillo, and he is currently working on a piece. He actually posted a sketch the other day on his Facebook stories. It is for one of the encounters called the Pendulum Crossing. It was one that I really wanted to make sure that there was a piece of art for, because the explanation, sometimes people are like, wait, what? How does this, what's going on again? And so, art is worth 1,000 words. And so Carlos is doing a full page piece to depict the Pendulum Crossing. Right now, Jamie Jordan is doing a half-page piece for the Grove of Self-Determination, which involves a sundial. And the sundial is actually pretty detailed because each of the segments of the sundial have different icons. And so Jamie Jordan is working on that, and it's looking great. He sent me a sketch the other day. And so things are moving along. There's still a lot to do, but I have faith that with my new schedule, that stuff will get done in a timely fashion, and hopefully we will print and ship in December. That's the goal. It's I was hopeful for November, but December. And so let's move on to Hillwood Camp, because I haven't talked about Hillwood Camp in forever. So this is the cover art by Carlos Castillo. It is the zine that I had a bunch of writing done for, but not a whole lot of art for. There were 3 character portraits and then this piece of art, and I was really starting to get anxious about getting this done in a timely fashion. And it just so happens that Carlos Castillo has a bunch of stock art, 7 pages of stock art on Drive-Thru RPG, and I was going through that stock art in order to plug art into the Canine and Bruiser zines, and I discovered, wow, Carlos has a bunch of woodsy type stuff, you know, a lone person walking through the woods, or very woodsy looking thieves and fighters and what have you. And I was like, oh, this is, or just a couple of axes. And I was like, this is exactly what I need to fill some of this space in Hillwood Camp. And I bought a bunch of stuff and started dropping it into the zine, and now it went from being my biggest concern to being almost done. So for those of you that are not familiar, because you only backed Protectorate of Jenulane, but you didn't back Cleft in the Mangled Hills, the Cleft in the Mangled Hills Kickstarter actually was Cleft in the Mangled Hills and Hillwood Camp, so it's supposed to be 2 zines. And so Hillwood Camp is going to ship along with Cleft in the Mangled Hills, and yeah, it's very close to getting done. So next step is to fill in a couple more things and send it to editing, and we will hopefully be very close to completion in the next week or 2. And so I actually expect that to be done before Protectorate of Jenulane. I expect Protectorate of Jenulane to be done next. And then the third and final thing is Cleft in the Mangled Hills. And Cleft in the Mangled Hills, unfortunately, stock art's not going to be a quick solution. I actually need to have portraits done of a few different monsters. And so it's just going to take a little bit longer. But things are moving along on the other projects, and you know, with Patreon resolved and that stuff, you know, moving ahead, I am hopeful that everything will start to move along on Cleft in the Mangled Hills as well. And I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I've recorded this video multiple times, but I had a new artist reach out to me that is somebody that's done some work with Old School Essentials and BX Essentials type stuff, and their art is great and will totally fit in with the rest of our stuff. So it's the same stuff that you've come to love and expect from Breaker Press Games. And so I will hopefully assign them some work this week, and I wanted to reach out to somebody else that I've been meaning to hit up in the last few days. So yeah, moving those things along. So to wrap this up, some things coming up. 1, I am starting a brand new campaign in person here in Milwaukee. It's going to start on Wednesday. I'm super excited for this. It actually was the inspiration for me to write this new adventure, Desperation of the Hungry, or new encounter, I should say, because I wanted something for that first session. They're going to roll up characters. I'm going to have them roll up characters instead of pre-gens. And then I wanted an encounter that will play out in an hour or 2 that sets the tone of Stennard. And Desperation of the Hungry really is going to do that, because it's about a bunch of people trying to come and eat the dogs in town. So yeah, grim and dark, as I like it. So that is going to kick off on Wednesday, and I am hoping to have 6 to 8 completely new to DCC, and some sort of new to role-playing games in general, playing in my tiny living room on the other side of this door. Or I should say dining room. The other thing that's coming up as I wrap this up is Midwinter is in Milwaukee in January. I will be there. And then Gary Con is coming up in March, and I will be there. So that is it. Thank you all for supporting Breaker Press Games. Thank you for your patience and understanding. I know the journey has been long and arduous, especially for those of you that are waiting now 6 months late on Protectorate of Jenulane. But I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully you can see it with me. Thank you to everyone that supports the Patreon. Please, if you've never taken a look at the Patreon, take a look at the Patreon. It is a great way to keep things moving forward. And then finally, as always, thank you for supporting indie games and indie game designers. You have a fantastic weekend, and I will talk to you all soon.